Hey, what's up, family? How you guys doing? Just checking in with you all to provide the virtual lecture for today. This will be a short video, and then I have a few other short videos for you guys to watch that will make up today's class session. My apologies for being out. I'm just experiencing some mild symptoms, and I think I'm fine. I've just gone to get tested. So I'm pretty sure the results will come back negative, but I, of course, would rather err on the side of caution. Um, but I want us to finish our discussion about gender, sex, and sexuality and pick up where we left off in our last class session, where we were kind of beginning to crack the seal on gender conflict. Now, what I want to follow up on that conversation with is just a few points. First, I want to talk to you guys about a specific element of gender conflict that I think I saw reflected in a lot of your discussions, but I want to give you guys some of the terms that will help you understand it and maybe help you be able to further discuss gender conflict. And then I want to introduce you guys to two of the founding female mothers of sociology. Two women by the names of Jane Addams and Harriet Martineau. These are phenomenal women that should be whose names should be included when we mention the founders of sociology, but even in modern times, we still tend to only see the names of Marx, Weber, Comte, and a few others. But Harriet Martineau was one that even came before most of those guys. But again, let's start from the top. So when it comes to gender conflict, excuse me, I want to start with a basic illustration, a little story. You guys know I love to tell stories. So once there was a few years ago, there was a major debate going on within the city of Greenville about this large public slash private development project. And it was causing a lot of stir because it was on a piece of land that was very important to our minority community that has kind of suffered from a lack of development, or what we often call divestment, right? And so this piece of land, many community members thought was a wonderful, well, first, this piece of land was an opportunity for development to be done, right? And that's an opportunity for the city to raise its tax base, because anytime the city can get something built on a piece of its land, then they can tax that land and add to their tax base, right? So this was a major project that a lot of people, developers, local leaders were interested in. But again, this plot of land was within the forgotten minority community in West Greenville. And many people saw it as an opportunity to bridge the gap between some of the neighboring communities, West Greenville, of course, but then also Center City, Uptown, and then the Dickinson Avenue Arts District, right? So these were three kind of communities where this land existed right in the nexus of those three communities, right? So it was a great opportunity for what many people thought would be a public-private partnership that would kind of create a space that would invite all of those communities and do some, again, build a bridge between those communities to build more interaction, more community engagement, and just more unity right throughout the community. So it was a big deal. Let's fast forward through months and months of community public hearings and public meetings and feasibility studies, and there was this outside firm that was going into the communities to facilitate these discussions. My organization, NC Civil, was helping out with the work. But we get to like the final day, and we're all at City Hall. Most of the people who've been participating in this project, going through all the grueling meetings and capturing all the data and discussing all the data, the people who were on speed dial to help kind of bring community members into the discussion to make sure that the voices of our communities were being captured. I mean, this was a lot of work over the course of several months, right? And this final culminating vote on city council, where many of us who had been invested in this project for months were present, right? So, no matter what side of the coin we were on, I think we all recognized that it was a work that we had all participated in and put a lot of energy into. So I won't talk about how the final vote went on council, but here's what happened. At the end of that night at City Hall, when the council finally made their decision, it was kind of like this weight was lifted off everyone's shoulders. It was like we finally got to the finish line for this thing, and everybody was just, I'd say super relieved no matter where you felt about the outcome, right? So again, where downtown is, there are a lot of bars, right? So at the end of the city council meeting, someone suggested, hey man, why don't we all go down, down to one of the bars that, here downtown, and let's just grab a drink and just unwind after all of these months of all this work and debating and disagreeing and so forth and so on, right? So most of the folks agree by and large, and we all begin to head down to this bar. Well, we get down to the bar and we all start ordering our drinks and laughing and joking and just, having a little moment of camaraderie between us all. And I began to notice that there was one particular female within the group. This was a female that was a director of a very important local organization. And this organization was very, very central to the development of this project and its plans, right? And I was just looking at it, and she's a good friend of mine, but I was just looking at her and remarking how, for that moment, she was just one of the guys. She was laughing and joking, and she was always a woman around town that kind of handled herself well. She was one that was noted by many as a worthy, I won't say a worthy adversary, but certainly a force to be reckoned with. I think that's a more appropriate term for her. And so I was just watching her as she kind of worked the room and joked with the guys and ordered her drinks and just really commanded her space in a very, I would argue, a very comfortable but yet powerful way. And I thought it was very remarkable, just her presence around all the guys. But then I began to think of how much, and here's the point that I want to make here. I began to think of how much struggle there is, or first, why it might be considered taboo to see a woman at night at a bar with a bunch of guys just laughing, joking, buying drinks, just being one of the fellas, right? Being just one of the regular people, right? And I thought about how society really, I would say, considered it taboo for a mother of children and a wife. And I knew, again, this is a friend of mine, so I know that she has children. I know that she has a husband. And I just thought how awesome it was that of a relationship she and her husband must have, right? Because she's always kind of pounding around with us, moving around the city, moving and shaking, making things happen. But then I thought about this concept that I want to introduce to you guys. And this concept is the second shift, right? This is something that a sociology researcher coined in some of their research. But this term, the second shift, it talks about how as women have entered the workplace and have begun to, and as equality, gender equality has risen, although as many of you guys mentioned in your discussions, it's certainly not equal, right? But women have certainly entered and begin to take up a lot more of the workplace. In fact, in today's times, women currently, unless the numbers have changed since the last time I've seen them, women currently hold more jobs in America than men. Period, point blank. Now, it's not like a big gap, but just think about what that means. In modern times, women actually make up numerically more of the labor force than men do at this current point in time, yet they do not receive equal pay. But this idea of the second shift acknowledges that as women more and more enter into the workforce, their duties still tend to not change at home. These ascribed duties, right? This idea again that many of you talked about in your discussion board postings. This idea that it's a woman's job to look after the children, to take care of the home, to make sure that meals are prepared, to make sure that the house is clean, to make sure that, again, the home is well taken care of. So, and here's the reason why that's super important to the idea of gender conflict. Well beyond just the idea that we shouldn't be assigning these jobs to particular people just because they're a man or a woman, saying that it's expected for you to behave or act or perform this way in society, right? That's wrong just fundamentally in and of itself, right? But this bigger rollout of how that wrong translates into conflict is that I feel like people, so here's the other part. As we were at that bar laughing and joking, man, there were a lot of powerful people there. And quite naturally, as the drinks started flowing, people started kind of sharing information. I think I remember getting an awesome opportunity suggested to me that it might be a good opportunity for me to invest in one of these spaces. And I think someone mentioned that, hey, if I had the dollars to put up, they could make sure that I got some sort of first look at one of these important sites that were surrounding this site for development, right? And so I walked away from that meeting with a few tidbits of knowledge that if I wanted to seize upon them, would have allowed me to be able to increase my wealth substantially, right? And through a low investment opportunity that could have easily paid off high rewards, right? And these are the kinds of conversations that take place after 5 o'clock at the bar. And I began to think that night about how so much advancement, so much professional advancement doesn't take place necessarily in the work site. So much professional advancement takes place in the after work hours when the crew, the groups, the inside groups, right? The inner circles go off to the bars and the different restaurants after work. And people start to share information and build relationships. What happens is it's those relationships and that shared information that begins to support the economic growth of individuals, right? And investment opportunities. But then it also cultivates relationships that translate into advancement within the workplace, right? Promotions and raises and things of that nature. It's the people that are able to attend those after work meetings and build those relationships and get access to that insider information. Those are the ones that get majority of the opportunity. So think about this. If men, even if men and women are able to go into the workplace, but women are expected to clock out and go home, but men are allowed to stay out after work. And if they make it home at 9-10 o'clock and say, oh no, I met with some of the work guys after work, we had a few drinks and kind of did some powwowing, right? But it was important for my career that I attend these functions, right? Everybody knows these kinds of functions are important for someone's career, right? But I thought about what are the consequences of women being almost expected to go to work and pick up the kids after work and kind of get right home, and how society's informal sanctioning of how we look at women who might hang around late night in bars, and not just with groups of women, because I think that's a lot more acceptable. But if we look around and we see a woman out late with a bunch of guys, we tend to assume that there's some sort of romantic relationships being cultivated there, or at least an opportunity for that. We might think this woman is fast, or we might think this woman is I don't know, using sex to get ahead or something like that. It's just the way that oftentimes in society we think. and it's frowned upon. So a lot of men, I'm willing to bet a lot of men would not like their wives leaving work with a bunch of guys going to the bar to hang out with the guys. A lot of men would feel self-conscious about that or feel offended by that. And but I think about how many women miss out on advancement opportunities because that second shift for women requires that they go straight home after work, whilst men are, it's almost accepted for them to be able to go to these kind of male bonding, powwows after work over beer and drinks or food or things of that nature. So this is what is called within sociology the second shift. And it's one of the ways that gender conflict really plays itself out, and gender inequality within the workplace and within the labor force truly plays itself out. So I want you guys to just kind of take note of that and be aware of that, because I don't think the book necessarily explains that. But again, the second shift for women is a huge source of gender inequality when it comes to the labor force, workforce, and career advancement between men and women. So I'm also going to share 2 more videos. One will be about Harriet Martineau and one will be about Jane Addams. Now, the only thing I want to say about those 2 is that it's super unfortunate that that these women are not credited with being a part of the founding forces of sociology, because they truly are. Again, I'll reiterate that Harriet Martineau, her work predates some of the men who we consider to be founding fathers, and her work is no less substantial. You guys will learn when you watch this video. The other thing I want to mention about Jane Addams, her work to found the Hull House and other settlement houses throughout the world, really, many sociologists see this as the basis for social work, because these settlement houses provided a lot of social programming within low-income immigrant communities that, as we talked about in the last class session, communities that were left out of opportunities to share in the economic growth of society, and of course communities who were living in poverty. The work of Jane Addams and her friends and colleagues who created these settlement houses, this is some of the foundational work that led to the discipline of social work, right? I want to drive home this point that during those times, the emergence of this work of these women was so unique, because it was based off of something that I talk about a lot: practical application of sociological understanding, right? Oftentimes within sociology, we are guilty of what we call armchair research. This is a scenario where we kind of take this very value neutral approach to observing social phenomena and thereby observing social issues. So what we tend to do within the discipline of sociology is that we kind of stand back, observe social issues, and in an effort to maintain a value neutral position of observation, we tend to not get involved, right? Remember how when we talk about the different methods of research, and within those different methods, there is participant observant, meaning that's a case where you actually go into the population that you are observing, and you become a participating part of that population. Now, while that provides a deeper level of contextual insight into the phenomena that you're studying, we've long since recognized that it does have some drawbacks, because by being involved in the work, it takes away a lot of value neutrality. Not only does it take away from your ability to observe with a value neutral perspective, but it also might influence the behaviors that you are there to observe, right? It's almost a case of the person that comes to observe my classroom, right? But the behaviors that they're observing, are those really the natural behaviors? Because I might be influenced by the fact that they're there. So if I'm on my best behavior and they record that I did a great job, well, is that really how I am every day, right? So that's a case where the participant observer actually had an influence on the behaviors that they were trying to observe and thereby capture, right? So again, sociologists really try to observe with a value neutral perspective. And oftentimes I think that leads to an unwillingness for us to get involved, right? So this woman, Jane Addams, and her team of awesome women, they got involved. They went into these communities. They aimed to impact the social issues that they were observing and developing a better understanding of. They looked at poverty. They looked at, child exploitation in the labor force. They looked at youth criminalization within impoverished communities, right? And they got involved and did the work to impact these things, to improve on the conditions, right? And they did it by and large through these settlement homes that they created. Well, the thing about this work is that as it began to grow, these women begin to be recognized. They begin to be invited to the different speaking engagements. They begin to be invited, to write to write on certain aspects of society and culture and things of that nature. They begin to be considered as authorities and subject matter experts in the space. And this is a time when it was very much taboo for women to engage in public speaking in such a way and to take a position as an authority on social issues. It was certainly taboo. So these women were really setting the trails of ablaze with their work, and it was, I would argue, it was rubbing the men the wrong way. See, what was happening is that these armchair researchers, these men that would kind of sit around in their double-breasted coats or their blazers and smoke the cigars and grow their big beards out, right? These were the men who at the surface were expected to be the leading authorities on social phenomena and different aspects of society. These were the men whom you would have expected to see as the guest speaker for these large public speaking engagements, right? And all of a sudden, these women were being published in journals, and they were being invited to as keynote speakers on important subject topics and certain important topics of the day, right? And it was rubbing the men the wrong way. Now, here's what I want to drive home with this point, and then I'm going to close off. Is that I want you guys to take notice of how social work and sociology is not taught within the same discipline. They are treated as two separate disciplines. You either go to the School of Social Work or you go into the Department of Sociology, but the two are extremely separate. And if you have a master's degree in sociology like I do, you are not qualified by that degree to engage in social work or to be hired as a social worker. There are two very separate degrees with different qualifications that are required of you in order to be a practitioner in those spaces, right? So I'm going to argue, and many sociologists argue, that the reason that the disciplines were divided derives strictly out of gender conflict, and more to the point, it derived out of the bruised egos of men who were used to being the usual suspects, those who would normally be called upon, right, to be these subject matter experts and to speak at these conferences and things of that nature. And it is my argument that these men who were still the controlling figures within the discipline, they did the work over time, consciously, and I would argue maybe even subconsciously, right, to separate social work as the kind of the space for the women. These enlightened and very intelligent and very well educated women, social work became their space. And I think it was a natural way or an unnatural way that the men fought to maintain their dominance over the discipline of sociology. by creating this separate space where the women who were actually doing the real work, a space for them to be able to, host keynote sessions and be invited to be guest speakers and to be published in journals, right? They separated that. They created another category for those women to maintain their dominance. And I would argue that for me, that's one of the greatest misfortunes within the discipline of sociology because it lacks the practical application in communities. And I also don't think that social work really gets to the heart of it because social work, I feel like, lacks the greater structural context and a willingness to address the greater structural inequities that exist in society. Social work doesn't do that. Social work deals in direct services with individuals who are suffering from poverty or other social ills, right? But it never leverages that talent to be able to address structural issues. That understanding is more held within the discipline of sociology, but sociology is not big on getting involved, right? So I think the separation that I would argue is rooted in gender conflict actually has harmed the discipline and made it more difficult for our society to find solutions and to be granted solutions through the discipline of sociology and its practitioners. But I think that that misfortune is rooted in gender conflict. So I think, to me, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I appreciate you guys for watching this video and for joining me. And again, make sure if you are part of my 9 a.m. Monday and Wednesday class, make sure you check the announcement because there are 2 more very short videos that I'm going to ask that you watch to make up the bulk of the November 1st, 2021 9 a.m. class session. Again, thank you guys, and I'll see you back in the classroom really soon.